listening to the Intrepid radio program with Scotty Roberts. Intelligent Talk.
Well, we're going to have about as intelligent talk as I can muster up for tonight. Been a long week, folks. Been gone for several days, as you know. Unable to broadcast. Well, I was probably able to broadcast, but mentally, physically, all that stuff, unable. So I took a few days off. And we are back tonight. I want to welcome you to the program. This is, of course, the Intrepid radio program right here on the Odyssey Radio Network. That's ODYSY1.com. Come on over, see all the goodness that's Odyssey Radio. Check out all the archives that he's playing throughout the day over there of this show. And also, you are joining me right here on my YouTube channel. That's youtube.com/Mr. Scotty Roberts. And I want to welcome you all tonight to tonight's show. If you are not a member of this channel, go down below right here. You'll see a little join button. Click on that. A little window will come up over the show and everything. And you'll still be able to see the show. And it'll give you 3 options to become a member of this channel. I would appreciate it if you'd go over, take a look, click on that, and become a member. And you'll see what kind of perks there are and all of that. One of the perks, of course, is me actually being here. So I know a lot of people were worried. I got lots of emails and lots of messages from people. And you know what? I appreciate the fact that you all care enough about me to do that. I will tell you this, though. It's funny in one respect, is that I can have over 550 shows up here. And if I miss 3 in a row because I'm out of town, I can worry people. And, you know, there's part of me that says, come on, guys, I'm only gone for a few days. And there's the other side that goes, oh, man, you care about me, and I appreciate that. So thank you, everybody, for all the kind words, all the concerns, and for being here tonight. That means a lot to me. Matthew Sainsbury, good to see you tonight. And Susie Q, nice to see you as well. And we got Audrey is already here. Audrey, good to see you. And Doug Stack, how you doing? How's the business going, Doug? How did your day go today? I hope that's all rolling along just fine for you right now. So it's good to have you here, brother. And let's see. So I know some people are coming in. I think some people might have already gotten used to the fact that I was gone for 4 days. And so they're like, oh, you're on tonight? So we might have to wait for some more people to show up and come into the room. Hey, Helene, good to see you. Alan Stiles, glad you made it in tonight. And people who are out lurking in the wings and you're not showing your name or face over here in the chat room, hey, nice to have you here. You can come into the chat room if you like, introduce yourself, or just watch from where you are. I'm just happy to have you here. And so, yes, it was a busy week. I was off working on several projects for my friend who has a few businesses. And he's the Lemon Squad guy. And you know what? We were talking about, he was musing over writing a book about his experiences. And I said, you know what you need to do is not write it as a business book. So he goes, here's how I made my life a success book. Who wants to read that? They get old after a while. I said, you need to make this interesting to other people. So we talked a little bit about what he could do. He's literally a rags to riches guy. I mean, he grew up in kind of a rough youth, and he had a good family, but a rough youth. And he was a mechanic, living hand to fist. And then, of course, he started several things. He had that verve. He had no money to make things happen, but he made that happen too. And he eventually made it. And the man I don't know if Antone just turned 50. Andy, if he just turned 50 or if he's about to turn 50, seems so much younger than me, to me. But, and he's doing all right. That's a great age to say, I've made something of myself. And so I am going to have him on this show one of these days soon, because I want him to share with you all how he did what he did and the kind of person he is. And he's a great guy and he's a good friend. He's been a friend of mine almost as long as I have known Rainey. And so 15, 16 years, I think I started doing work for him. And so that's where I was all week. We were working on, if you look over here, you can see the Hell's Head Coffee logo right there. We were working on his Hell's Head Coffee company. We started that last summer, and then it just all got put aside. He was just so busy doing other things. And so he said, let's get this thing launched. And so I want to tell you, you can go right now over to hellshead.com. There, I put it into the chat room. If you click, oh, there's 2 L's in it. Look at that. I can't even do, I need to have a producer is what I need. Somebody who runs the show. And all I got to do is talk. There it is. hellshead.com. Go over there. Now, that site is not perfect yet. There's still a few glitches and things that aren't filled out. Still a couple of areas. Some of the forms don't work yet. But you can at least see the work we've been doing and the stuff we've been putting together. And we went over and visited the coffee maker, the roaster of the beans and things like that. And I got to tell you, it's going to be good stuff. And so, Doug, you want something good for your shop? Talk to Andy. He'll work a good deal out for you. Hey, Steve Clark, how you doing? Good to see you in here tonight. Glad to see you, brother. And Barbie D, good to see you as well. And anybody else I'm missing that has snuck in behind my back? And glad to know you're still here, too. What a stormy weather week, says Helene. The test match cricket rained off. We're having a winter for summer solstice weekend. Nice. And, oh, that's right. It's summer solstice weekend coming up. Today's the 18th. So, yeah, a couple more days. And so what are you doing for summer solstice, folks? Do you even know what it means? We'll talk about that on Sunday, summer solstice. And we'll fill in some of the gaps for any of you that might be there. There might be some gaps in some of the stuff we're going to be talking about tonight as well. And all right, Doug. Yeah, I'll talk to you. I'll pursue you on Andy's behalf. So let's see. I'm just looking at the chat room. See if there's anything interesting in there. We still don't have disclosure yet. That's still coming accordingly, as they say. So we'll see what's going on with that. And that's it. That's all. That's all I got there. Let's move on. And so I want to thank you once again for being here tonight. I think I've thanked you 3 times, which means I'm just rattling off the top of my head as opposed to talking in cogent agenda speak from behind the microphone. So this little microphone. And it looks bigger than it is. See, if I raise that up, see how big that looks next to my head? Well, my head's all the way back there. So there's my microphone. Boom. That's it. It's just the foreshortening of the weird camera that I have. So tonight I wanted to talk about ghost stories from Egypt. And not just your spook stories type of thing, but ghost stories all about ghosts. Why do you think Egypt draws people to that kind of story? I think it's because of the kind of past, the ancient past that Egypt has. All the focus on the spirituality, the focus on mummifying, the focus on life after death, the resurrection as they saw it. Excuse me, I still got the tail end of this thing going on that I had last week. And I was knocked on my butt all last weekend, by the way. And the beginning of this week, even though I had to run up to Andy's. So I'm still just barely getting over it. And my son is about 3-4 days out ahead of me. I think he's all done with his. So a 3 more days, I should be back to somewhat normal. By the way, Rainey has taken Rowan to Cub Scout camp. And so they left this afternoon. They won't be back until Sunday afternoon. So there will be no Rainey on the Scotty and Rainey It's Sunday show. Once again, I don't think she'll even be able to make an appearance because she won't be here. So they're at camp, and it's their summer camp. And, it's because it's scouting. The parents have to go. The parents are asked to come along. Now, there are some kids that don't have their parents that come along. But for the most part, they encourage parents to be there. And so Rainey went with Rowan. And I don't think Rainey has a troop out there this time, even though she's a den mother. So different age group. So that's where Rainey is tonight in Rowan. So it's me and Flynn and Ellery tonight. And so hopefully everything will go fine. I told them they can both come and hang out and sleep with me in the big bed in the master bedroom. And we'll turn on the TV up there and play a show and let them all go to sleep up there. And of course, I got home this afternoon from being gone since, when did I drive out to Andy's? I think I drove up there on Monday late morning. And so I just got back a few hours ago, really. And Ellery was the first one. She doesn't say a lot, like, "Oh, Dad, you're home, yay." But man, she made a beeline to me and threw her arms around me. And I think she's just happy that Dad's home. So I told them they could all come on up, and the boy's probably not gonna. He might. But I want to keep tabs on him too. My son Flynn, at age 11, just about 12, a few more weeks, he'll be 12. He is a night owl, so much so that he doesn't like to go to bed. This is why he hates mornings so much. I got home, and around 3 o'clock this afternoon, so maybe 6-7 hours ago, I got home. Around 3 o'clock this afternoon, I'm like, I've been home for a half an hour. I'm like, where's Flynn? Is he out somewhere? No, he's still sleeping. Well, what's he doing still sleeping? Well, he was up until about 7:30 this morning, up all night long, just roaming the house, watching movies, watching YouTube. Didn't want to go to sleep. Rainey said that she thought that he was really anxious for me to come home because he a couple of times jumped up and he says, "I thought I saw the white Suburban pull up. Is that Dad? Is Dad coming?" In the middle of the night. And so that's always nice to hear that. But my son I told him I want him to sleep in my bed with me tonight in the big king size bed. You can sleep in there, and the little girl's going to sleep here. And I said, because I want you not roaming around the house tonight. And I said, and if you feel like roaming, I'm going to turn the TV on like sleep sounds, the frequencies that they play, and the little, abstracty, galaxies and things. And I said, so we won't be watching action films, but I said, you can bring a book with you to bed. And hopefully he'll just read himself to sleep. So there you go. So I don't know if you guys have kids like that. My son, and it's not that, we don't tell him what to do. It's not a free-for-all here. But he likes to get up and roam around. We're all sleeping, and he's up roaming around the house. Something to do. Or he'll come down here and get on my computer. So anyway, there you go. That's the home front. Let's see what's going on over in everybody's world. Whatever's saying. Audrey says, celebrating the summer solstice, running around naked under the strawberry moon. There's some strawberry connotations in there, too, and I don't know what they are. But, hey, anyway, hey, cool. That's what solstice is for, huh? No one sensible goes to Stonehenge anymore, says Helene. I left that long time ago. Too much nonsense. Ain't that the truth? You got to go in the off season if you want to enjoy it and get the feel for the place. I know the first time I was there, there was a palpable draw to the place. Now, I wasn't there on the solstice. I was there in, I want to say September, October. So, let's see. Can someone get rid of autocorrect? Yeah, lane lines, not yeah. Elaine, you should see some of the mistakes my autocorrect does. My intuitive text, phooey on that. No such thing. So, try Stonehenge drive on the winter solstice without snow. -7 degrees Celsius isn't easy. And I'm a mountain climber born in Lancashire. So 7 degrees Celsius is what Fahrenheit? I have no idea. I don't think isn't 32 like equivalent to 0, or is 0 in Celsius equivalent to 32 Fahrenheit? I don't know. Can't remember. And Einstein said, I never bothered to remember anything I can look up. So I haven't looked it up today. So I don't remember it. Tire King got his ass kicked today, says Doug Stack. Well, that's good. You're going to have to tell us about that. Elderberry, welcome to the show. Good to have you in here tonight. And everybody. Delaney, did I see Delaney is in here as well? Good to see you, Delaney. Nice to have you back. Master Finn says, hello, Commander. Good, sir. Evening, crew. Good to see you, brother. Glad you're here. Glad you're back. And it's nice to have you all back. It's nice to be here. I will tell you this. There are days when I take a couple of days off and I'm like, oh, thank God. I don't feel like it. And you know what happens? Right around 9 o'clock at night, 5 minutes after 9, I'm like, I should be doing radio right now. No, I'm taking the evening off. I'm not doing it. And Andy commented on that all week. Aren't you doing radio tonight? I said, no, I took a few days off. And it was good because I was slammed while we were there and tired. But there you go. 102 degrees heat index Fahrenheit where Steve is today. 106 with the heat index. I think I just came in a little bit ago at just about 9 o'clock. And it was still reading something like 96 degrees Fahrenheit out on the front patio. So that's shaded. That's even got a roof on it. So, but the humidity is a little down. So it's not so bad. Not like Egypt. Now, Egypt, since we're talking about Egypt tonight, Egypt, when I've gone there, I've mostly been there between January and April 1st, in that range of time. And it's generally not very hot yet. It can be downright cool. And, but it's still warm. I mean, we were wearing lightweight jackets, hats, scarves, and all of that. And it was just fine. By the way, I guess since I'm doing some Egyptian stuff, maybe, can I get that off of there? Hold on. Maybe I should be wearing my Egyptian scarf. Hold on. Can I get it off of there? Or do I have it pinned up? Or it's hooked on a hook. Hang on a second, guys. It's back here. There it is. Oh, boom, bop, bap, bap, bap. Flag is up there. Okay. So here's my Egyptian scarf. This is one that John Ward gave me the last time I was over there. And there's my flag. Hold on. I kind of discombobulated everything. For those of you who can only listen and not see, I just knocked everything around here. That's all. Boom. There it is. That's a little better, huh? Till I fix it. You'd think I'd have planned this ahead of time, but no. I just thought of it. So here we go. So this is my Egyptian scarf, and it's a British military that John gave me. And you see variations of this with people who wear these all over Egypt. It's got the little tassels on it and so on. And the way I was taught to wear this was to kind of, as as John showed me, to kind of just fold it in a big triangle. And then you just kind of wrap it up like so. Okay. And you bring it around and down through. And the same on this side. Bring it around and back down. And so there you go. And that is pretty much how you wear your scarf over there. And that's how I would tie it. And sometimes I would tie it like a do-rag over my head, and I'd take the loose ends, and I'd do the same thing, and I'd wrap them around. So it keeps the sweat off. We'd wear a hat or something too, or you make this be the hat. So there is my my Egyptian scarf, and you just kind of fuss with it until it's doing what you want it to do. So there you go. Since we're going to be telling tales from Egypt tonight, so I could also put on the hat, but I don't want to. Well, I still could. How about that, huh? Here. There we go. One of my fedoras. But so that's pretty much how we dressed in the desert between January and March. And it was nice, you know. We didn't have a bad time with it at all. So having said that, I said that tonight's topic, I called it Gods, Demigods, and Spirits of the Dead, or the land of Egypt, or all these things. And that quote comes from Manetho. Manetho was a late 3rd century or early, the way you want to remember, the dates go backwards. So be very early 3rd century into the 400s. He was a historian from Egypt in think of 400 BCE, 400 years before the time of Christ. I want to find his exact quotes here. And Spirits of the Dead. Let's see where his quote is. He said this. Manetho, in his histories. Manetho's List of the Pharaohs. I'm looking for this because I didn't look it up earlier. But he talked about Egypt being the land of the gods, the demigods, and the spirits of the dead. Now, even for 2,400 years ago, that's quite the descriptor for Egypt, even in his day, to say that already they were talking about this being a place of gods, demigods, spirits of the dead. And he had his reasons for doing so. Now, I want to give you a little history of Manetho. He's believed to have been an Egyptian priest from Sebennytos. And he lived in Ptolemaic Egypt in the 400s, 300s. And he authored the Egypticaea, History of Egypt. And there's only two full English translations of this thing. And the origins of his name is lost, but some speculate it means Thoth, or Thoth, the god Thoth. Truth of Thoth is what Manetho means. So, or Manetho, Thoth. And he's the beloved of Thoth, or the beloved of Neith, or the lover of Neith. And less accepted proposals are Mianu Heter, or the horse herd, or the groom. And the Manai Jethuti, I have seen Thoth. And is what that means. And so there's no sources for the dates of his life and his death, but Manetho is associated with the reign of Ptolemy I, Soter, who reigned from 323 to 238 BCE. Plutarch puts that date in there. And so he's really more the very late or early, lower numbered year 300s. And there's a mention of someone named Manetho in Hyba Papyri, dated to 241 BCE. And he's the celebrated author of the Egyptiaca. It's all these vowels together. Aegyptiaca. Egyptiaca. And so Manetho may well have been working during the reign of Ptolemy III as well, which is 246 to 222, which would put him early in the 200s. But he would have been very old by that time. And in the Egyptia, the history of Egypt, it might have been Manetho's largest work, and certainly the most important. It was organized chronologically, divided into 3 volumes. His division of rulers into dynasties was an innovation. But he didn't use the term in the modern sense. By bloodlines, would rather introduce the new dynasties whenever he detected some sort of discontinuity in the royal line, whether geographical, where like Dynasty 4 was in Memphis, up in the north, just south of Cairo, or Mennefer at the time. And Dynasty 5 was from Elephantine, which is way down in the south. and or genealogical differences. As in Dynasty 1, he refers to each successive king as the son of the previous to define what he means by continuity. And so this is what he did. He was an historian. And here's a historian of his day, who's so familiar with the spirituality of Egypt that he spoke of Egypt as being that place. It's the land where you would go and experience the gods and the demigods and the spirits of the dead. Now, we used that when we did the Exodus reality tour, and we brought people along with us, and we had Chris Conway come along, Scottish medium. We used that as kind of a tagline, Manetho's quote, for what people were going to experience while in Egypt. They were going to experience the land of the gods and the demigods and the spirits of the dead. And because there was such an emphasis in ancient Egypt put on the resurrection and the life going on, not resurrection in the same sense that we might understand it in, say, Christianity, but resurrection in the sense that the soul goes on the Ba and the Ka and all of that. And I wanted to get to some of that tonight too. And he was considered to be very similar, Manetho, with a guy named Berosus. Now, do you know who Berosus is? Anybody here? I'm looking over at the chat room. Any of you here heard of Berosus? And one of the things that he was quite well known for writing about, Berosus was a historian. And Berosus wrote about the half fish, half man characters that would rise up out of the rivers and out of the sea. And they would teach the humans all about life. They would teach them about agriculture, teach them about the signs of the sun, moon, and stars. It's all the same things we talked about when we spoke about what the Watchers were supposed to have done for people. He wrote about the Sumerians this way. And so Berosus is very well known for presenting cogent history while at the same time presenting some of this stuff, this very fanciful, mythological, ghostly type tales as the real things that were going on. And as a matter of fact, many thought that Berosus and eventually Manetho lived around the same time and that they kind of copied each other. There was one, Syncellus, who was an historian of the day. He said this of them 2,400 years ago. He said, if one carefully examines the underlying chronological lists of events, one will have full confidence that the design of both is false, as both Berosus and Manetho, as I have said before, want to glorify each his own nation. Berosus the Chaldean, Manetho the Egyptian. One can only stand in amazement that they were not ashamed to place the beginning of their incredible story in each one and the same year. And so that is what was said about them. And that was by Syncellus. I was going to try to find you a little bit more about him, and it jumped me a long ways from where I was. Okay. Anyway, so there's some of the similarities that were there. They both wrote of history. They both wrote of ghosts. They both wrote of gods and spirits of the dead. And so that's Manetho. Who are the gods and the demigods of ancient Egypt? The people that deal with gods, those who deal with the gods and the demigods and the spirits of the dead, and the mortal kings who ruled Egypt. That's citing Manetho directly. And Eusebius begins by reeling off a list of the gods, which consist essentially of the familiar Ennead of Heliopolis, Ra, Osiris, Isis, Horus, Set, and so on. And these were the first to hold sway in Egypt. And so this is what Manetho said in ancient days. I always thought that was a very interesting descriptor of ancient Egypt, that even in ancient times, this is the way contemporary historians saw Egypt. They saw it through the lens of the spiritual. They saw through the lens of sometimes the spooky, if you will. And there's an old ghost story that I wanted to tell you about from ancient Egypt. And this is a little bit lengthy, but this is a ghost story. Now we have our own ghost stories. We'll talk about things like, the Amityville house. That's more contemporary ghost story. We'll hear ghost stories from people of all kinds. I can tell you, I can talk for 2 hours just telling you little snippets of ghost story tales that I've experienced. And so we've all heard ghost stories, and we all know what they're like, campfire stories and things like that. Hey, Sean Bowden, good to see you, brother. Glad you made it here. And anybody else slip in while I wasn't watching? So it's good to have you here. So this is a ghost story from ancient Egypt, and it's the best known ghost story from Egypt. It's known simply as a ghost story, but sometimes it's referenced as Consemheb and the Ghost. And the story dates from the late New Kingdom of Egypt. That would be about 1570 to 1069 BCE. So this is late. This is, by the way, my guy back there, Senenmut, and the time of Moses and the Exodus, I believe, all fell into the early New Kingdom. So this story comes from the Ramesseid period. The Ramesseid period is the time of Ramesses. Think of Ramses the Great and so on. And it was found in fragments and on an ostraca, which is pottery, little bits of pottery that were written on. And this is where it was found and pieced back together. And the scholars such as George Posner in 1960 and Jürgen von Beckenrath in 1992 claim that they're copies of a much older story from the Middle Kingdom of Egypt, much earlier than the New Kingdom. And this would make sense as a traditional view of the afterlife in Egypt, as a paradise was often questioned in texts from that era, such as The Lady of the Harper. It's an old story questioning the afterlife. A dispute between a man and his soul. These are all things that were written back during that time period. And Consemheb reflects this view in his conversation with the ghost. And a ghost story, as it's called, tells the tale of the high priest of Amun, Consemheb, and his encounter with a restless ghost whose tomb was deteriorated. Now, the story exists on these 4 ostraca that are found, these broken pieces of pottery, where the story is written in ink on them. And they were discovered around the necropolis of Deir el-Medina. Now, Deir el-Medina is that place. I've been there. This is a place I told you where John Ward and I bumped into, of all people, John Anthony West. John and I had walked across. It's all on the west bank of the Nile in Luxor. And we had gone to Hatshepsut's temple. We had gone a little earlier than the day on the other side of the small ridge of a mountainous ridge of the Theban Mountains. Just right over on the other side is the Valley of the Kings. But you go down, you have the Valley of the Nobles. Then you had several temples from several different pharaohs in various states of ruin or reconstruction along the way. And Deir el-Medina is one of those places where there is a Holy of Holies and a temple is still in there. And so as we were going in, John and I, into the Holy of Holies, who should be coming up with this little old man with a pith helmet? Pardon me, he says, and as he's coming out. And John Ward looks at me and says, Scotty, says, brother, do you know who that is? He says, that's John Anthony West. And so we walked over and introduced ourselves. And he had a tour group he had with him. And that's when I invited him to come and speak at the Paradigm Symposium, which he did the following year. And so I met, of all places, I met John Anthony West for the first time in the Luxor desert at the ancient temple of Deir el-Medina. And that is also where they believe that original temple site was built on the site where they believe the Ogdode, the birth of the original creation egg, in Egyptian mythology. It's like their Adam and Eve, their creation story, that it took place right there, and the temple was built there to commemorate that site. So Daryl Medina is where these ostraca were found, with this ghost story that I'm going to tell you about here. And they're housed in the Museum in Paris and Florence and Vienna and Turin, and each place where it relates to a different section of the story. And as is the case with ghost stories from around the world, the Consemheb tale operates on two levels: entertainment value and cultural education. Now, an audience would have been entertained while at the same time receiving instruction on the importance of honoring the dead by caring for their final resting places. So it was teaching a spiritual lesson, but also to entertain. A ghost story. Why do we tell ghost stories? We can say we tell a ghost story to people to scare them, creep them out. But that's to entertain. We entertain ourselves and we entertain them with it. And so that's exactly what he was doing at the time. Whew! Pardon me for that cough button interlude right there. And I'm talking harshly with my throat. And so, as delicate as it is these days, I am still having a couple of problems with my throat. So you'll have to bear with me on that as I go along. So I got to take the hat off because I'm actually getting warm in here. Despite the air conditioning, the hat holds your heat in, keeps your soul in your head, right? So let's move on with this ghost story, because I think this is intriguing when we start to dig into this a little bit. And let me find my place here. The story itself, scholars differ on the interpreting of the text. Some claim it's a first-person narration by a speaker who spends the night in the necropolis at Thebes. And Thebes, of course, being ancient Luxor. And he encounters an angry spirit. Think, hear the clock gonging out midnight and the chains rattling of old Marley when he comes to visit Scrooge, Ebenezer Scrooge, in A Christmas Carol. So it's got that same feel to it. The nameless narrator goes on to the high priest to seek his help, and Consemheb raises the spirit to talk to it. And the first-person narrator interpretation rests entirely on one of the early lines. Other scholars claim it was a third-person narration, which tells how Consemheb encountered the spirit in the necropolis and then dedicated himself to helping it find peace. And so the beginning of the story is as fragmentary as the conclusion, which breaks off. So it's understandable how we're kind of left to conclude the I mentioned at the start indicates first-person narration. And so the story makes more sense as a third-person omniscient narration. However, as no first-person narrator makes an appearance after the opening lines, and these lines could in fact be dialogue spoken to Consemheb, some translations in fact omit the I in the opening lines entirely, attributing them to Consemheb without any effect on the story's cohesion. So either way, this is the details of breaking down and trying to understand the story. Either way, after two lines which relate some of the journey, Consemheb returns to his house, calls on the spirit to come to him and identify himself. And he promises to help him by building this new sepulcher and providing him with all sorts of good things, quote unquote. And it's clear that the high priest is already aware of the spirit's troubles. And the ghost appears and says his name is Nebusmekh, Nebusemekh, Nebusmekh. And Consemheb asked the spirit Nebusmekh what's troubling him. And Nebusmekh replies that his tomb is fallen and no one now remembers where he's buried, so that the proper offerings are no longer brought. Think of Have you seen the ghost story animated film Coco? Takes place in Mexico about the little boy who goes to find the spirit of who he thinks is his father and to remember him by. And in some of the old Mexican spirituality, if you don't remember it, if you're not remembered, you will pass away forever in eternity. And so to have that life in eternity was to have your name spoken, to have your picture shown, to have people remember you and offer up prayers and so on. And so Field Guy says he's been abandoned. Abandoned. I don't know why. Field Guy, where are you? What you doing? Why are you abandoned? So anyway, Consummeheb sits down next to the spirit and he weeps for him in a very sad state, and for the sad state of the spirit himself. And because Nebusmek says that he's exposed in the wintry wind, hungry without food, and fears that he might soon cease to exist at all, or as he puts it, to overflow like the inundation, the Nile inundation, and be lost because his soul has no home to contain it. So Consummeheb sits down and weeps for him. Then the spirit relates who he was in life, and it goes like this from this text on this ostraca. This is what the spirit relates to Consummeheb. He says this: when I was alive upon the earth, I was overseer of the treasury of King Mentuhotep, and I was lieutenant of the army, having been at the head of the men and nigh to the gods. I went to rest in year 14 during the summer months of the king of Upper and Lower Egypt, Mentuhotep. He gave me my 4 canopic jars and my sarcophagus of alabaster, and he had done for me all that is done for one of my position. He laid me to rest in my tomb with its shaft of 10 cubits. See, the ground beneath has deteriorated and dropped away. The wind blows there and seizes the tongue. Now, as for your having promised me, I shall have a sepulchre prepared anew for you. Pardon me for the dry cough. I have it 4 times already that it will be done. I've had 4 promises made, he says, that it will be done in accordance with them. But what am I to make of the promises you have just made to me, so that all these things may succeed in being executed? Now, that's what appeared on one of the ostraca. And Consummeheb assures the spirit that he's going to do everything he can for him, saying, please express to me a fine commission, such as it's fit to be done for you, and I will surely have it done for you. But the spirit isn't convinced. Nebuchadnezzar says, of course, what use are the things you would do? Unless a tree is exposed to sunlight, it does not sprout foliage, meaning that he does not expect the priest to be able to provide him with the kind of home he once had, as Consummeheb does not have those kinds of resources. So just as a tree cannot blossom without sunlight, his tomb cannot be rebuilt on promises and goodwill. And so the priest has assured him already that if he cannot build him a new tomb, he will have 5 men servants and 5 maidservants bring him food and water as offerings daily. But the spirit would not be consoled. So Nebuchadnezzar disappears. But Consummeheb does not forget what he's promised. He sends men to search for the ruined tomb, and they find it 25 cubits distant along the King's Causeway at Deir el-Bahri. Now, Deir el-Bahri, that is Hatshepsut's temple, and I've shown you pictures of that before. It's just down the way, a couple of miles down the dirt road in the desert against the Theban mountains, is Hatshepsut's temple of Deir el-Bahri. And there's a causeway that leads up to it. So he's saying along that causeway and up in the rocks, In the cliffs, there's all kinds of tombs through there. And so he's saying he found it 25 cubits distant along the King's Causeway at Deir el-Bahri. And returns to... Now, by the way, you could walk from Deir el-Medina to Deir el-Bahri in half an hour, because you'd be crossing through other temples and the tombs of the nobles and all of this stuff and all this rubble. You get down the road to it, and you're there. You could drive there in 5 minutes. So they find the tomb. Consummeb is pleased with this news, and he celebrates with the men, and afterwards summons an official to tell him about the project. And the story ends with the line, "He returned in the evening to sleep in the Neh, and he," but then the rest of the tale is lost. That's how it ends. The Ni, N-E, in the line refers to the necropolis at Thebes, and it's thought that Consummeb returns to where he was at the beginning of the story to tell Nebuchadnezzar that he will soon have a new home. So it's very interesting. So now I've got the whole text of the thing here, and in the course of the tale, one's going to find the L period P period H period after the king's name, and this is the English equivalent of the Egyptian phrase Ankh, or the Wajah Seneb. It means life, prosperity, health, which appears after the royal names in ancient inscriptions. And so the following text now follows Beckereth, the scholar Beckereth, his translation as reprinted in W.K. Simpson's The Literature of Ancient Egypt, an anthology of stories, instructions, stelae, autobiographies, and poetry. How's that for a title of a scholarly book? Now, it omits the first-person narrator's line from the beginning of the story, which is, "Now, while I was looking toward the west, he went up onto the roof," quote unquote, which often appears in the translations as the third line below. And ellipses throughout indicate missing words from the story. There's brackets, there's parentheses in the English translation here. Such probable words, and I'm not going to read those all to you. I might tell you if I think it's pertinent for you to hear it. But those things are filled in sometimes because they make sense in the flow of the narrative. Now, this story that I have from this translating of the text goes like this. It starts with brackets. According to, bracketed, it starts just like this. His habit, after the way he had done, he ferried across and reached his house. He caused offerings to be prepared, saying, "I will provide him with all sorts of good things when I go to the west side." He went up onto the roof and invoked the gods of the sky and the gods of the earth, southern, northern, western, and eastern, and the gods of the underworld, saying to them, "Send me that august spirit." And so he came and said to him, the spirit did, "I am your ... it's missing, who has come to sleep during the night next to his tomb." Then the high priest of Amun, Consummeb, said to him, "Please tell me your name, your father's name, and your mother's name, that I may offer to them and do for them all that has been done for those in their position." And the august spirit then said to him, "Nebuchadnezzar is my name. Ankhmen is my father's name, and Tamshes is my mother's name." Then the high priest of Amun-Ra, king of the gods, Consummeb, said to him, "Tell me what you want, that I may have it done for you. And I shall have a sepulchre prepared anew for you, and have a coffin of gold and zispis wood made for you, and you shall rest therein, and I shall have done for you all that is done for all who are in your position." Somebody's watching on the camera over there. I think it's my daughter, not my wife. So she's looking in on the camera to check us out. We have cameras all around the house, by the way. Yeah, that sounds like a little girl. Okay, bye. Pardon me, folks. All right. And I shall have a sepulchre prepared anew for you, says Consummeb to the spirit, and a coffin of gold, and Sisyphus wood made for you. And you shall rest, therefore, and I shall have done for you all that is done for one who is in your position. And the august spirit then said to him, no one can be overheated who is exposed to the wintry wind, hungry without food. It is not my desire to overflow like the inundation, not seeing my tomb. I would not reach it. There would have been made to me promises, ... and it falls off. Now after he had finished speaking, the high priest of Amun-Ra, king of the gods, Consimheb, sat down and wept beside him, with a face full of tears. And he addressed the spirit, saying, how badly you fare without eating or drinking, without growing old or becoming young, without seeing sunlight or inhaling northerly breezes. Darkness is in your sight every day. You do not get up early to leave. Then the spirit said to him, when I was alive upon the earth, I was overseer of the treasury of King Mentuhotep, and I was lieutenant of the army, having been at the head of men and nigh to the gods. I went to rest in year 14 during the summer months of the king of Upper and Lower Egypt, Mentuhotep. And he gave me my 4 canopic jars, and my sarcophagus of alabaster. And he had done for me all that is done for one in my position. He laid me to rest in my tomb with its shaft of 10 cubits. See, the ground beneath is deteriorated and dropped away, and the wind blows there and seizes the tongue. Now as for your having promised me, I shall have a sepulchre prepared anew for you. I have it 4 times already that it would be done in accordance with them. But what am I to make of the promises you have just made to me, so that all these things may succeed in being executed? Then the high priest of Amun-Ra, king of the gods, Consimheb, said to him, please express to me a fine commission such as is fit to be done for you, and I will surely have it done for you. Or I will simply have 5 men servants and 5 maidservants, totaling 10 devoted to you, in order to pour libation water for you, and I will have a sack of emmer delivered daily to be offered to you. And also the overseer of the offerings shall pour libation water for you. Now, you notice they didn't do this for everybody who had passed on. So in this story, there are some special accommodations for the spirit. Maybe it's because the high priest of Ra didn't normally even see these kinds of spirits. So then the spirit of Nebusmek said to him, of what use are these things you would do? Unless a tree is exposed to sunlight, it does not sprout foliage. But stone never proceeds to age. It crumbles only through. Then it leaves off. Then it picks up again. King Nebheptre, IPH. There the high priest of Amun-Ra, king of the gods, commissioned 3 men, each one, and he ferried across and went up, and the men searched for the tomb near the holy temple of King Nebheptera. Nebhepetre. It ends with Petra, starts with Neb, and there's he in the middle. Nebhepetra. Boom, the son of Ra, Mentuhotep. And they found the tomb, and they found in it, being 25 cubits distance along the King's Causeway at the Deir el-Bahri. And then they went back down to the riverbank, and they returned to the high priest of Amun-Ra, king of the gods, Consimheb, and found him officiating in the god's house of the temple of Amun-Ra, king of the gods. And he said to them, hopefully you've returned, having discovered the excellent place for making the name of that spirit called Nemsumek, and endure unto eternity. And then the 3 of them said to him with one voice, we have found the excellent place for making the name of that august spirit endure. And so they sat down in his presence and made holiday. And his heart became joyful when they told him, until the sun came up from the horizon. And then he summoned the deputy of the estate of Amun-Menkau, and Mancow, it sounds like Menkau, and informed him about the project. And he returned in the evening to spend the night in Ni. And he... ... The end of the account. It's broken off. And so here's the story, an ancient Egyptian story of a priest communing with a spirit, and the spirit coming to him and saying, I'm lost because my tomb is lost, and those who once knew me have forgotten me. Whatever shall I do? And the priest says, we'll build your tomb up so people remember you. And in a sense, this is like, do you remember when I read The Ghost of Nicholas Grebe? It's a little illustrated kid's book. And I used to read this for my children when they were little. And the ghost says because he cannot find his, a dog went and dug up part of his bones. And he says, forevermore I quest till all my bones together rest. And this is, hi, are you joining me tonight all of a sudden? Are you here to help me do radio? There's Ellery. There you go. I see half your face. Hi there. What you up to? Do you remember The Ghost of Nicholas Grebe? Remember when we read that book? Forevermore I quest till all my bones forever rest, says Nicholas Grebe. Now, maybe this is the same state of affairs as here. I guess I'm being pushed over so I can make room for my daughter. There you go.
When are you?
See? Now there you are.
When are you done?
When am I done? Well, I'm almost done. It's almost near the end of the show, but we have so much more to talk about. And I haven't done my show all week. When are you going to be done? Are you ready for bed? You know what you could do while you're waiting for me? You could go wash your face because you got stuff on your face from dinner. And you go brush your teeth. You want your teeth to fall out? Why don't you go brush your teeth?
I already had 2 fall out.
Yeah.
4.
Yeah. That's who the Krampus comes and gets at Christmas and puts them in the basket and takes them away. Little girls who don't wash their face or brush their teeth. Did you know that? With his long claws and his big fangety teeth. All right, go brush your teeth, and I'll be out in just a little bit, okay? All right, let's get back to the show, folks. For a little familiar interlude. So I got 3 more hours for tonight's show to catch up, says Doug Stack.
No.
Yeah.
No.
There you go.
No.
Not all in one night, Doug.
No.
Yeah, but we'll get caught up. So let's go on and see if we can finish this.
You get 10
there's something
more
that's
minutes.
okay. Only if you brush your teeth, and then I'll be done in 10 minutes. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. All right, as noted in this, there's a little commentary here. It's assumed that Consummeb that he remained true to his word, and the story ended happily for the spirit of Nebusmek. And so we don't know, though. We don't know how the story ends. It's a typical tale of ghosts. There's a ghost, there's a presentation, and there's a call to action, and then they would end with something good taking place. So ghosts were not considered spooky in ancient Egypt. However, they were simply a natural part of existence. And one of the Egyptians usually took pains to guard against anything that seemed overly spooky or scary about the stories. And the mortuary rituals, which honored the dead, were intended to make sure that no one came back from the afterlife dissatisfied at all. That's why they went to such ends and means for those who had died. Now we hear about a lot of this for royalty, nobility, the upper class. What happened with the lower class? I know that there were lots of tombs that had been found. I know in John and Maria's site at Gebel El Silsila in Egypt, they found lots of tombs of common folk. So The proper rites surrounding the death and the burial were all important in ancient societies. And the Egyptians were absolutely no different in this. And since the afterlife was considered simply a continuation of one's life on earth, and it was hoped that the spirit of the deceased would be judged favorably by the god Osiris and allowed to pass on to paradise. You know, in our culture, in America, Western culture, basically, we've lost that edge to spirituality, to life after death. Doesn't mean there aren't pockets of us, or maybe even many of us, or most of us believe that there's something else there. But as a going concern, our cultures do not really act as if we believe that's a real thing. I was very interesting. It was last night when I was sitting in Andy's quite late. We had finished working, and I went to lay down, and I turned on the TV on Netflix. I looked in their documentaries section, and I found a newer, a couple years old documentary about Saqqara. Now, Saqqara is where the stepped pyramid of Dozier is, where I had my vision, my experience in the Hebsed court there. And but this documentary was all about a certain man's tomb that they found. And they were trying to pin it down to who he was. And it was very interesting that all of the workers, the men who were the common folk, who were the diggers, you would hear them in their own language. They would say that my father before me was a digger, and his father before him, and I'm a digger as well. And I brought my son, and he had like a 13-year-old son with him, 12 or 13. He says, my son is with me today because I want him to start to know about digging, so that when it becomes time for his job, to him to take over a job like this, he knows what he's doing and what he's talking about. But they started talking about the finds when they'd find a skeleton. Oh, they'd say, this is the first your face has seen the light since you were buried here. You were buried in these shafts that were roughly 3 to 4 feet by 3 to 4 feet. And they could be anywhere from, 6 feet to 9 feet to 25 feet deep. And all this dirt has been accumulated in them over the centuries and the millennia. And they would dig these all out with buckets, and haul the buckets out and dump them. And they'd get down to the bottom, and they'd find at the bottom in the wall of the shaft down there, a hole was dug out and a coffin was inserted. And they would find the wooden coffin. And I said, sure enough, this is, I can't think of his name, not Wadjet. It was a name like that, but we have found him. We have found his face. And you could see the camera and the angles down there in the pit as these archaeologists were looking on the face. The diggers were looking on the face of the man who'd been buried there 3,000 years earlier. And they're looking on his face, and the reverence they're speaking. Here are modern men in contemporary day and age. These are diggers, and they're not all wearing the galabeas, and what would look like traditional headdress. They're wearing, pants and shirts and shoes, and they're digging, and they're down there doing their stuff, and in their own language, they're looking and they're saying, there you are. I have found you. In a gentle voice. Your face has not been seen by the light for 3,000 years, and I welcome you back. And it's not just poetic language they're using, it's a heartfelt spirituality, even though many of these people are Muslim, which is very different from the religion of that day. And Amanda B. Ozymandias, how great is Ozymandias and how he has fallen to ruin, and all that remains is the low, and I've got Ozymandias right here somewhere. Folks, you remember the poem by Shelley, Ozymandias? If you don't remember it, I'm going to read it for you right now. It's by Percy Bysshe Shelley, and it's called Ozymandias. And you've heard parts of this before. And actually, in my own book coming up, The 10 Breaths of Ra, I open the book with this poem by Shelley. And it says, I met a traveler from an antique land who said, 2 vast and trunkless legs of stone stand in the desert. Near them on the sand, half sunk and shattered, visage lies, whose frown and wrinkled lip and sneer of cold command tell that its sculptor well those passions read which yet survive, stamped on these lifeless things. The hand that mocked them, and the heart that fed, and on the pedestal these words appear, My name is Ozymandias, King of Kings. Look on my works, ye mighty, and despair. Nothing beside remains round the decay of that colossal wreck. Boundless and bare, the lone and level sands stretch far away. It's the story of Ozymandias that Amanda B. just recited or mentioned. And so these men, it made me think of this tonight. What we're talking about now is the reverence with which the ghosts, if you will, the spirits of these people are handled. And they believed that they were introducing them to life again, that the resurrection or the life was in the recitation of the name, the remembering of the name. It's like I mentioned the animated film Coco early on, the Mexican story. Very beautiful, beautiful animated movie. If you haven't seen it, you've got to watch it. Coco, C-O-C-O. And it was all about being remembered by your descendants or remembering your ancestors so they don't fade away into nothing. That's what this ghost story was about that we just read. Wesley Curry, welcome. He says, my personal philosophy is that I'm extremely stupid. A lot less problems that way. Ain't that the truth, Wesley? I kind of look at things very similarly. I always say the more shit I know, the more I know I don't know shit. So there it is. Let's see. Amazing world, says Amanda B. What a catastrophe it would have been. Hard to think how it could happen. I'm not sure what exactly you're referencing, unless it's, Ozymandias. Do you know what Shelley is referring to when he writes about the fictional Ozymandias in his poem? He's writing about the gargantuan statue of Ramses II, which you can see in Luxor at the Ramesseum. There is old ruins of a temple. It's almost across from Deir el-Bahre. If you walk out to the end and back out to the road from the Theban Mountains, walking straight east, and you cross the little road there, you can go across, and there is the Ramesseum. And the old granaries of Ramses and the old temples all in ruins. And there is a huge statue of Ramses. His big toe was about that big next to me, and his whole foot went out. And but there's the 2 trunkless legs rising out of the stand, the two broken legs, still standing, but there's nothing at top of them. And there's the big head of Ramesses lying in the sand. And that head, it's about the size of, think of a Volkswagen Beetle. It's about that size, round, laying in the sand, cracked. And this is what Shelley saw when he was in Egypt, when he conceived the poem Ozymandias. Helene says, Percy Shelley and Mary Shelley's estate was where my great-grandmother's school, Milton College, was built. Oh, that's interesting. So Steve Clark says, I found out that I might be related to Clark of Lewis and Clark. That's fantastic. It's one of my favorite pieces of American history, Steve, are the Lewis and Clark expedition. So, folks, there's a lot more to talk about the ghosts of Egypt. and the ghost stories of Egypt, and Manetho's speaking of the gods and the demigods and the spirits of the dead as being the inhabitants of the land of Egypt. And where did I get Israel from? There's a text out there that's known as the Lay of the Harper, and it dates from the Middle Kingdom. This would be, the 1700 to 2000 BCE. And this is before the time of Senenmut and Hatshepsut and the Thutmosian dynasty and so on. And it encourages its audience to make the most of the time, because death is a certainty. It says in the Lay of the Harper from almost 4,000 years ago, "Make a holiday and do not tire of playing, for no one is allowed to take his goods with him, and no one who departs this life ever comes back again." And the most enduring Egyptian view of death was that death was a paradise. It was a continuation of life on the earth, but lacking any disappointment, lacking loss, lacking distress. It was far from a "you can't take it with you" understanding. For most of Egyptian history, the view was you keep it forever. You get to take it with you. And as one would find, one lost at death in the paradise of the field of the reeds on the other side, this vision of the afterlife altered in different eras, and sometimes being more widely accepted and sometimes less, but it remained fairly constant. Along with this view went an understanding of disembodied spirits, of ghosts, which more so than the view of the afterlife remained unchanged from the earliest evidence through the end of ancient Egyptian history. Ghosts were as much a part of the reality of Egyptian life as any other aspect of existence. There was an Egyptologist, Rosalie David, wrote this: "It was believed that society consisted of four groups: gods, the king, the blessed dead, and humanity. And they all shared certain moral obligations and a duty to interact in order to maintain world order. And the existence of this order and the assumption that it was constantly under threat was a basic premise of Egyptian belief." And this is what you see in the wars with the Egyptian gods, constantly under attack. So the central value of Egyptian culture was Mat, M-A'-At, Mat. Hatshepsut herself, her birth name was Matkare, named after the god Mat. It meant harmony and balance, which the Egyptians observed in virtually every aspect of their lives. And among the more important of these was the proper burial of the dead. And a human being was thought to be traveling on this one-way road from birth through death and onto the afterlife. And provision was made through the tomb paintings, the inscriptions, statuary for the soul to return and harmlessly visit the earth, but the spirit was expected to depart to its own realm relatively quickly. And the appearance of a ghost, and especially its interaction with the living, was a certain sign that the natural order had been disturbed. And the most common cause of this trouble was a spirit's dissatisfaction with its body's burial, or the state of the tomb, or the lack of respectful remembrance. Look at spook stories, ghost stories that we have nowadays. Look at the ghost hunting we do and the paranormal investigations we do. And what do we get? We find that they're dissatisfied souls. There's very rarely do you run into the spirit or the soul that is so satisfied, it just wants to come back and tell you how satisfied and happy it is. Doesn't seem to happen much. So, Helene says, "Oh, love to all the other forms. Geeks and nerds out there, we tinker stuff right." There you go. So, that's all we're going to do for tonight. There's a lot more to say on this. We're going to carry this over a bit. Sunday morning, we're going to talk a little bit about the solstice. And maybe we'll talk about these ghosty things a little more. I'm going to save that maybe for next week. So, guys, I appreciate you all being here. Especially after I was gone for 4 days. And then I was sick one day last week. Maybe even 2 days last week. So I've had an accumulation of days in the last 2 weeks where I was either didn't feel good enough to come on radio or I was traveling. And so I want to thank you for sticking around and coming back in. I appreciate your time, and I hope I make it worthwhile for you. And so, everybody, I didn't speak much with you over there in the chat room. Matt Finn, good to see you. You have a good night, too. And Wesley, well, thank you, Wesley. I appreciate that. Best show around, he says. I appreciate that, brother. I'm certain that were mankind able to see 1 minute of heaven, says Wesley, mass suicides would take hold of society. Maybe so. What did the Bible say about the life after? It said, eye has not seen, nor ear heard, of all the things that God has prepared for those who love him. That's from a Christian perspective. But it was the way of saying, we have no comprehension of what things will actually be like. And who knows if that's the true path or not. So you want to tell everybody good night?
You get 5 more minutes.
Oh, I get 5 more minutes? I was going to end now, but thanks. I get 5 more minutes now.
Yay!
Yay.
No, you get to end now.
All right, I'll end now. You go on out. I'm going to end, and I'll come out. Okay? Say good night to everybody. Bye. All right, guys. I want to thank you all for being here. Thank you for giving me your time. If you're not a member of this channel, go over, check it out. Hit the join button down below. $2 a month, $5 a month, and $15 a month. Automatically taken out of your card every month. That will give you a membership here. And you can cancel it anytime you want to. If I dissatisfy you, you may cancel me. So it's there. And if you'd like to become a member, go ahead and do it. It helps us keep this show plugging along, even on the weeks when I'm not here. So you guys have a good night. And you know what? I'm going to see you on Sunday morning. Tomorrow is everybody's day off. You have a good Saturday and enjoy yourselves. And you know what? In the meantime, live long and prosper.
You're listening to the Intrepid radio program with Scotty Roberts. Intelligent Talk.